The sun was dipping low over Santa Barbara, painting the horizon in streaks of gold, fading into violet. Eleanor Jameson clipped the leash onto Titan, her Belgian Malinois, with calm hands, though her chest carried a weight she couldn't shake. To anyone else, it looked like a quiet evening stroll. To her, it felt different. Something was changing in the air. Titan wasn't just a pet. He was the living legacy of her late wife, Camille, a strong-willed Air Force dog handler who trained Titan before cancer claimed her life. The military once dismissed him as too sensitive for combat. But Camille had always said with a wink, "This dog doesn't just follow commands. He follows hearts." Since her death, Titan's heart belonged only to Eleanor. With Camille's dog tags resting warm against her chest, Eleanor walked the cliffside trail she had followed countless times before. Her steps were steady, shoulders squared, her presence alone an act of defiance in a world that often tried to erase women like her. Neighbors used to wave. Now, she felt more eyes watching than hands greeting. Silence was replacing warmth. Titan sensed it too, ears sharp, muscles taut. His gaze sweeping porches, parked cars, and alleys like a seasoned guard. At Mission Ridge, he froze. 2 blocks away, a black and white patrol car sat idling, its lights off, engine running. Eleanor narrowed her eyes. That car was new. So were the officers inside. She forced herself forward, hearing Camille's voice in her mind. "Walk like you own the ground. Walk like they can't erase you." But this wasn't just paranoia. For weeks, the same officers lingered around her neighborhood, watching at gas stations, the park, even near her street. Sergeant Clay Breener with his fake politician's grin, Drew Watkins who carried cruelty like a game, and rookie Matt Riley, too unsure to resist but unwilling to walk away. They never spoke much, but intimidation doesn't always need words. That evening, they didn't leave. Titan's low growl rumbled like distant thunder. Eleanor tightened her grip on the leash. She didn't turn, didn't flinch, but inside she knew. She was being stalked. This walk wasn't about exercise anymore. It was a test, a reminder of her right to exist openly, without apology. They didn't realize Eleanor Jameson had been standing her ground her whole life, in classrooms where she wasn't welcome, in workplaces where she was overlooked, in a marriage much of the country still refused to respect. She had buried her wife and carried on. Fear no longer had a place in her body. As the sun's last light sliced through the clouds like a blade, Eleanor lifted her chin. Let them follow. Let them watch. They had chosen the wrong woman. And Titan, her loyal soldier, was already watching back. The next evening felt heavier, as if the city itself knew what was coming. Eleanor adjusted her jacket, clipped Titan's leash, and stepped outside. The dog's posture was sharp, alert, every movement deliberate. He wasn't just a companion, he was muscle, memory, and instinct forged through years of training. The streets seemed quieter than usual, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was staged. And then she saw them. The same black and white patrol car slid from the shadows like a shark circling prey. Its headlights blinked once, and the vehicle slowed to match her pace. Titan growled, low and steady. The car stopped abruptly at the corner, and 3 officers stepped out. Sergeant Clay Breener in front, polished shoes crunching against the asphalt, his smile nothing short of mockery. Drew Watkins followed, leaning back as though this was a casual errand, gum snapping between his teeth. And finally, Matt Riley, the rookie, shifting uncomfortably, eyes darting between Eleanor and the ground. Well, Breener said, his tone dripping false charm. Evening stroll? Mind if we have a word? Eleanor didn't slow her stride. If you had something official, you'd already be saying it. Otherwise, I don't talk to shadows. Watkins laughed under his breath, circling just far enough to block her path forward. Got a mouth on her, doesn't she? Careful, Breener added, tilting his head toward Titan. That mutt looks like trouble. Mutt, Eleanor snapped, her voice like a whip. This dog has more honor in his paws than you've shown in your whole career. The rookie, Riley, shifted uncomfortably. Sarge, maybe? Shut it, Breener barked. This is routine. But Elainer knew the truth. This wasn't routine. This was targeted. They'd been circling her block for weeks, waiting for a moment they thought they could control. And tonight they were done hiding it. Watkins stepped closer, his hand brushing the holster at his side, his grin widening. Funny thing, ma'am. You fit a description we've been told to watch for. Description? She asked, her tone scathing. Black? Woman? Alive? Which box did I tick this time? The crowd that had been forming at the edges of the block. Neighbors peering from porches, a couple filming from across the street, murmured in agreement. The performance wasn't private anymore. Breener's jaw tightened. His intimidation wasn't working. You're obstructing an investigation, he snapped. No, Elainer replied, her shoulders squared, Titan's leash taut. You're obstructing my life. Titan's growl deepened, vibrating through the street like a warning drum. His gaze locked on Watkins, every muscle primed. The officers hadn't realized yet what kind of training this mutt carried. Camille had left Titan prepared for moments exactly like this. The air grew electric. One wrong move and the balance would shatter. For the first time that night, it wasn't Elainer who looked cornered. It was the officers. The street seemed to hold its breath. A faint wind rustled through the trees, carrying the tension like smoke. Breener squared his shoulders, unwilling to lose control in front of a growing audience. Watkins, still grinning, took a bold step closer, hand tapping the butt of his holstered weapon as if daring Titan to react. That was the wrong move. Titan lunged forward a half step, muscles rippling under his coat, lips peeling back to reveal sharp, disciplined fangs. His growl deepened into a sound that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Watkins froze, his smirk vanishing instantly. Elainer held firm on the leash, her stance commanding. Stand down, Titan. Her voice was calm, controlled. The voice of someone who had nothing left to fear. Titan obeyed, holding position but keeping his eyes locked on the threat. Breener sneered, though his hand twitched near his belt. That animal is dangerous. He should be put down. Dangerous? Elainer shot back. This dog is a veteran. He's protected more lives than you ever will. He was trained for discipline, not cruelty. Can you say the same about yourselves? A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. Phones were raised higher now, the red glow of recording lights unmistakable. Breener noticed his jaw tightening. The control he thought he owned was slipping through his fingers. Riley, the rookie, took a step back. His voice cracked when he tried to intervene. Sarge, people are filming. Maybe we should. Quiet, Breener barked, his temper flaring. Do your job. But Watkins was already rattled. He hadn't expected Titan to react with such precision. The dog hadn't snapped wildly. He had measured the threat, responded, and waited for command. Watkins shifted uneasily, muttering, "This isn't worth it, man." Elainer lifted her chin, her gaze steady. You think intimidation works on me? I buried the woman I loved. I've walked through grief you couldn't carry for a day. And this dog, my wife's dog, has been trained to protect what matters most. You don't scare us. Not anymore. The words landed heavier than she realized. Camille's spirit seemed to walk beside her in that moment, her training echoing through Titan's controlled defiance. It wasn't just Elainer standing her ground. It was Camille too, her strength living on through the animal she had poured herself into. The crowd erupted in quiet cheers, some clapping, others calling out encouragement. The tables were turning. What began as an attempt to corner a woman had become a very public display of resilience. Breener's face flushed red. He reached for his radio, snapping into it harshly. Need backup now. But even as he spoke, he could see the tide had already shifted. Backup would only bring more eyes, more cameras, more proof of their intimidation. Titan, steady and poised, sat at Elainer's side now. His growl fading into silence but his eyes sharp as blades. He had already won half the battle, not with violence but with presence. The officers had wanted to corner her. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by a dog trained for war, a woman who refused to break, and a neighborhood unwilling to stay silent. Backup never came fast enough. By the time another squad car rolled down the block, the scene was already out of the officers' control. The crowd wasn't just filming anymore. They were speaking, shouting, demanding answers. A chorus of voices rang through the street. "Leave her alone. Stop harassing her. She's done nothing wrong." Titan sat like a statue at Elainer's side, every inch the disciplined soldier Camille had trained him to be. His stillness spoke louder than any bark. A warning, a presence, a reminder of what strength really looked like. The rookie, Riley, was the first to crack under the pressure. He lowered his gaze and muttered, "Sarge, we've got to let this go." Breener's face was pale now, sweat clinging to his temples. Watkins was already backing toward the car, his earlier bravado completely gone. The crowd wasn't on their side, and worse, neither was the truth. Elainer's voice cut through the noise, steady as stone. "You thought you could corner me, but all you've done is prove what you really are." She gestured toward the phones, the witnesses, the neighbors watching with narrowed eyes. "This is the end of your intimidation." For a long moment, Breener didn't speak. Then, with a tight jaw and a stiff motion, he waved his hand. "We're done here." It wasn't an apology, not even close. But it was retreat. The officers got back into their car, doors slamming harder than they needed to. The engine roared to life, and within seconds they were gone. Their departure cheered by the very people they had once expected to intimidate. Elainer crouched to Titan's level, brushing a hand over his fur. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice cracking with both pride and grief. Titan's eyes softened, and for just a moment, she felt Camille there, as if her wife's strength was flowing through the dog, steadying her heart. The videos didn't stay in the neighborhood. Within hours, they spread online, picking up thousands of views. By the next day, local news stations were calling it a community standoff and an act of resilience. Civil rights groups demanded answers. The department announced an investigation. And the names Breener and Watkins were suddenly tied to something they couldn't outrun: public accountability. For Elainer, the victory wasn't in headlines or investigations. It was in knowing she had not been silenced. She had stood her ground, with Titan at her side, and turned fear into defiance. Her late wife had trained Titan for combat, but he was more than a weapon. He was a guardian of memory, of dignity, of love that refused to be erased. That night, as Elainer hung Camille's dog tags back on their hook and Titan curled at her feet, she finally exhaled. The world hadn't grown kinder, but she had proven one truth unshakable: she was not alone, and she never would be, not with Titan, not with Camille's strength, and not with the community that had found its voice alongside hers.